pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Let the record reflect that Director Gentilini is absent. 4.0 student representation, there is none. 5.0 agenda additions and deletions.
I have none tonight.
All right. Visitor input, we do have a person that wants to speak. Mr. Chad,
Do you need to speak into this?
you can.
I'm loud enough as it is. Hi, everyone, if you don't know who I am, my name is Chris Chad. I am a taxpayer in Evelyn, I'm a citizen of Evelyn, and I'm a teacher in the district as well. And I'm just here with one really brief request from the board, if possible. I've attended a couple of the joint meetings over at the co-op, and their setup that they have for comments and questions at the end of the meeting seems to be very positive, and it helps to make what's going on more community driven throughout the process. And I know that here at our meetings we don't have that as an option. So I'm only here to ask that, maybe during the duration of building the new school and getting everything up and running, if we could add a question comments portion at the end of the meeting, because there's always things that pop up in the middle of the meeting that would be really nice to have some input on, or to be able to make it, truly a community effort. So that's all I have to say.
Thank
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Anybody have any comments on that by the board?
Go ahead.
I don't have issue with that. I mean,
Okay.
I don't have an issue
So-
with it. And I think the biggest thing is the meetings have been, like he had said, they've been very positive and very respectful in nature. And I think if that's continued, then that would be appropriate. And then if anything ever does get out of hand, you can call out of order and.
No, no, let me just clarify, so you're saying like at the end of every meeting, or do you kind of like want to chime in like during things as they're discussed, or is that how you, or just
I
that?
was just thinking at the end of the meeting, just because as you start the meeting today, if there's anything that maybe strikes us as odd, or we'd have a question on, we can't comment on it until
The next meeting.
So it'd be just something at the end of the meeting that we can have to comment on that happens during the meeting.
Okay,
And I don't know if it's appropriate, but even if maybe the visitor input gets moved down to the bottom.
that would.
But
No,
then you
you
have to
don't-
put because I don't know if I'm going to want to speak at any meeting, so I'd have to put my name on or request to be in the visitor input.
Well, the board can change the rules.
Yeah, we can.
We can just revisit the policy and change the policy if we want to have a policy meeting.
I know the policy was changed
There's some
2 years ago, or about a year and a half ago.
Yeah, about a year and a half ago, and it just was that the person who wants to speak during visitor input would give the board chair or the superintendent a heads up 5 minutes before the meeting, and give what they would like to speak about.
It's tough. I think we might have to just have some further conversation
Yeah.
because
Right.
I don't necessarily know if I agree on moving visitor input to the end, because sometimes people are speaking to what we are going to be voting and deciding on in the
True.
meeting, and I would want them to have that opportunity at the beginning to make sure where they clearly see the agenda and know what they're going to be speaking to. So I think just to have a conversation of what that ending would look like then for open comments or discussion.
So you could put like visitor input, and then you say, and just leave the visitor input there, and then just have something at the end.
Comments and questions.
Comments or questions or something. Because I think that'd be,
I think the thing to do is to have a policy meeting on that policy, and then in the April board meeting, we discussed having a policy meeting on another issue, the discipline and the bullying, and I guess that kind of fell through the cracks too, so maybe we could
Okay.
schedule a policy meeting for both of those things.
probably put more participation back in the participation part of that policy.
Yeah.
Okay, all right. 7.0, approve the agenda.
I'll make a motion to approve it.
I will,
Support.
okay, so it's motion by Sather, second by Lotiger. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. 8.0, approve the treasurer's report for the second check writing of June.
Pretty brief report you have in your packet. Itemization of total expenditures totaling $80,877.45.
Can I get a motion to approve the treasurer's report for the second check writing of June?
I'll make a motion.
Motion by Yuhan. Can I get a second?
Support.
Support by Director Sather. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. 9.0, consent agenda. Consent agenda, approve the minutes of the regular meeting Monday, June 10th of this year. Approve the minutes of Thursday, June 13th of this year. Approve the minutes of Monday, June 11th of this year.
17.
17. Approve the 1920 membership renewal of MREA. Approve the 2020 membership renewal of MSBA. F, approve PSEO agreement with Mesabi College. G, approve Range Mental Health purchase and service agreement. And that's it.
I'll move support, but I have a question of a D and G that I either remove or just discuss it under at this point.
What do you got?
Yeah.
It's just-
For MREA, I just wondered, what do we get for our membership in here? They're just a lobbying group?
I believe, they have, you subscribe to the email? No. They
No.
do send out, is it monthly? Do you get it? You send out, it's, they're a rural advocacy group that lobbies for rural issues and legislation.
How different is that from MSBA? They do the lobbying and they do their reports on the legislative session, and they've got their platforms and things.
It's not a ton different.
I think the one piece that, because we do get the emails for the MREA also that I have liked is that it speaks to the rural communities strictly versus MSBA is just general for the whole
Statewide.
state. I do think that to have someone speak to a rural lens is important.
Do we have any, interaction with this group, or do we have any representation, or do we go to any meetings if there's anybody from the district?
With MREA?
Yeah.
Not that I'm aware of. I know I run into them just in my organization once a year. It's finally.
So we don't have any input or suggestion routes or avenues. We basically just get some emails from them for updates, legislative updates. I'm not sure that we're not duplicating with what MSD, although I understand what you said, Kelly, but
And that's the major difference, what she thought.
yeah.
Says that they provide professional development opportunities.
For
They
additional.
have a yearly, like for me, I could go to a yearly convention that they have.
I was going to say, yeah, they have the conference coming up.
Okay, I just didn't know how much interaction we have with them.
I don't
other
think
than
a
the-
lot.
Yeah, so
Honestly, yeah, I don't think a lot.
it's something we could do without. We didn't have it before, I know that.
Or is it something that we
The law.
would want more interaction
Well.
with too? I mean,
Yeah. Do they have boards that member districts could vie for spots on their board?
Yes.
Well, then maybe we should go for something like that anyway.
Okay, I think it's in even years.
Okay, board representation. All right, well, that's,
Well, Justine sent you that stuff,
Oh.
make sure that you're signed up for their email that they send out.
then I see that they base their fee on adjusted pupil units, where MSBA does just, what is it? It's a smaller, the smaller number, because adjusted pupil units is your student count And then it's weighted?
It's the way it suits them.
Yeah, and then it's just on pupil units for MSBA, but that's neither here nor there. But on the Range Mental Health Service Agreement, if we want to go to that one next,
Sure.
I had just some questions on, I was thinking that we should probably get some report from them of, first of all, what services they provide. They don't have to give confidential information or names, and, you know, how much of this did they do, how many groups, how do they evaluate the success or failure or whatever of it, utility of it. Then I wondered how much last year, I know they went a few years ago to kind of an à la carte on basis instead of just here's for the contract for the year. How much has it cost us the last couple of years going à la carte for these services?
Does that also include, I know that there was a therapist that was coming over this past year, correct?
Yep,
Is that included in there as well?
yes.
It is included in there?
So my understanding too is that some of it is billable if the individual has insurance and
Yep.
is able. And is this those that would not be eligible for that?
There
Those
is
that
a-
are uncompensated or would not be able to?
Correct me if I'm wrong, but there's also a grant that, for those that don't have insurance, there's a grant through, like, Range Mental Health that will pay for those that don't have insurance to be billed. And then we pay a small portion of their fees, correct?
You're close. The grant actually comes through the Family Services Collaborative, which pays for a chunk of that. They typically do not, they being mental health, they do not see kids unless they are eligible.
On insurance. So
Okay.
do we ever receive bills for this? I guess that's where I'm wondering about. So it has a breakdown for different individual and group things. Are we ever seeing bills, or is this just attendance for those meetings? So these aren't necessarily therapy sessions. Is this what ADAPT is doing?
Adapt.
We don't have ADAPT.
Is the skills?
Do we have ADAPT anymore?
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
yeah,
That is the main portion of what.
of the
service
skills
that they
training,
provide.
okay.
They also send a therapist into Franklin once a week, and how much did you have one?
1 day a week, and then
But that stuff is more billable.
That
I mean,
is
that's the
all
billable.
billable,
This stuff
yes.
is like the ADAPT, I mean, that
Yeah,
answers.
yeah.
Groups and individual,
Yeah.
and they, you know, it's kids that have a mental health diagnosis, and they're able to, they work on goals, they get treatment plans, they work on goals. So when you're saying about being measurable, or, you know, they're therapists, that's goals for them, and then their ADAPT worker works with them on those goals.
It's the
So-
skill training. piece,
right.
Yeah. And then the individual education plan team meetings for professional practitioners to sit in on those. Okay.
So, again, the question is, you know, how much do we pay for these services out of our budget not billable per year? Is there some kind of report that they give? I know they used to give reports
Oh,
of,
I would think that
General
they could
reports,
easily,
yeah.
Yeah, I haven't seen one since I've been here, but I can ask.
yeah?
I'll ask.
So yeah, that would be really helpful to even do a quarterly. And
Yeah.
I know they track their data and their numbers.
Yeah,
and
so that we've
And
got
they're
it.
usually high
And
numbers
so-
too.
So,
And just, you know, see what's going on and how they're helping and what the cost is versus whatever. And then the other thing is on Exhibit B about the liability insurance. And I talked to Jamie about this today because I asked him a question about what he's going to talk about EMC today too. About those numbers. Jamie, you said you're going to review those to see if you had any suggestions about.
He's
Did you
under
want to-
12.2.
Okay,
Right.
okay, but if we could visit that in conjunction with his 12.2, and maybe he has some insight on that. So, okay, so if we get a,
I'll support
okay,
I'll support Polly's motion.
okay, then that would be with the cost and then maybe some kind of.
So a report from, so G, you want a report from,
Range
Mental
Mental
Health
Health Center.
okay, so 9.0,
And annual costs.
okay, 9.0, approve the consent agenda as before you with an addendum to have a report on the Range Mental Health Purchase Service Agreement, some sort of report.
On the service.
Along with, and then the annual cost breakdown
Carol's here.
would likely just be part of that.
So can I get a motion to approve the consent agenda?
Just,
That's
All right,
got it.
okay, all right,
And I support it.
okay, all right. Any more?
Okay.
just a question, I mean, can you add anything to the consent agenda, or do you have to take it off and then approve it? I have no problem with
Yeah,
this. I
yeah.
think
You
it's a
probably
good
should do
idea.
it that way, but, that's why consent
Okay.
agendas,
Oh.
I like to take them separately just because of this type of a thing, if you have one or two that you want to talk about, but that's what makes it awkward when things are all put in the consent agenda.
That's when we would just request to pull it off. then,
Yeah,
technically.
I know. So, but you're right, that would have been the vote to pull it
Okay,
off.
so are you going to rescind your motion to approve?
No, because Jeff said what he got, so I just went on and explained myself.
Well, and, I mean, I guess the other piece of the discussion and what is being requested is not necessarily any disagreement with
Yeah.
the approvals or anything of that. It's just requesting additional information
And
from
then,
one of the pieces. I mean, it's,
That's fine.
okay. So any more discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. 10.0, items removed from the consent agenda, there was none. 11.0, personnel. 11.1, there was nothing. 12.0, new business. 12.1, presentation of broadband project.
Mr. Chair, we have Melissa Cox. Did you come with her?
I did.
You did? All right, they're going to talk about the broadband project that they have going on. There's a information. Yeah, you can step up to the
Okay,
podium.
perfect.
Mr. Chair, members of the Evelyn Gilbert School Board, my name is Betsy Olavanti. I am on the Business Development Committee at the Laurentian Chamber.
And I'm Melissa. I'm the president of the Laurentian Chamber of Commerce.
So over the last year, the Business Development Committee undertook an effort to bring a blended broadband cohort community to the Quad Cities of Evelyn Gilbert, Virginia, and Mountain Iron. Mountain Iron Beale has done one the previous 2 years, and so we recognize the value of bringing that to the communities, so we decided to bring one to the service area for the Laurentian Chamber. In your packet, we sent a little presentation a little bit ahead, and so we'll just kind of run through this really quick to give you sort of a background on why we're doing this project, and then we'll talk through some of the things from there. So broadband matters because of the digital divide that's starting to happen in economic diversity and in our communities. And so that first slide really talks about combining that access, which is folks with access of 25 megs down and 3 megs up, and with the demographics of our local areas and how that matters, and talking through what that does for our business communities. So the next slide talks about why broadband matters. Why does that access map matter with our demographics? Because of the global internet traffic. So in 1992, we were using 100 gigs a day. Now, by 2021, which is only 2 years off, we're using 106,000 gigs per second of internet traffic. So in my home alone, I'm a member of there's 5 members in my family. We have a cell phone for each of us, and we also have 3 TVs, both of which are enabled to access the internet. I also work from home on my laptop for UMD, and we also access other school activities and things. Okay, so I live in Fayette Township, and the internet there isn't so bad now that they brought the new access in. Okay, but the previous access we had was a little sketchy. So, I would be uploading a presentation file for my work, and it's about this size. This exact presentation took 8 minutes on my previous access. okay? So I'm calling all the kids in the house, right? Turn off your devices, mom needs to work now. And that's kind of, what's starting to happen even in our rural communities, right? So the Laurentian Chamber Broadband Cohort, then, our goals are to implement technology adoption projects, so increase the number of broadband users in our communities and increase the sophistication of their use, and then also spur some infrastructure development. So you see the list down here. These are the communities that have been supported by both Blandon and the IRRR. This project is supported by the IRRR in our community to bring Iron Range communities to that level of usage where we are getting some projects with providers coming in and delivering better service. So the Laurentian Chamber Broadband Cohort details then, we facilitated community meetings. We had a few of them. We determined some of the priorities that citizens had and focus groups in our area had. We started developing projects. We're bringing this to you today because we want the Evelyn Gilbert schools to be part of these projects. So some of the other school districts have done Wi-Fi on buses. And what that is you have Wi-Fi on your bus for your student activities, for the longer bus routes. I heard you talking about that at your working session before this meeting. One of the things that we do there is, if you're talking about the hardware that goes on those buses, a broadband grant through the chamber can pay for half of that equipment on your bus. Okay? So other school districts have done this and gained access to it, and that's a huge advantage for your students, especially when they're traveling for some of these longer bus rides. We have $150,000 in those access grants for projects like that. The cash and in-kind, cash is usually a 3-to-1 match, so you bring 25% to the table of, somebody's time here at the school, your IT people, things like that. And then the Blandon cohort grant through the chamber will bring the other 3 parts of that, so the 75%. You bring 25 with in-kind, and we'll bring the 75%. If it's an equipment grant that you're requesting or new equipment, it's a 1-to-1. You bring 50%, we'll bring the other 50%. And you can even do these. I know that you're replacing your building coming up, but you can even do these projects with that in mind. Some of your technology that you have in your boardroom, things like that. Are there needs in your auditoriums, in your classrooms, in software that you have? Some of the other schools have used these projects for school forest updates. So they have geocaching and Wi-Fi units out in their school forest, and they're doing projects out there with the kids. There's some really neat curriculum level, greenhouse-based, activities that you can bring your community in as well to share in those projects. And so, some of them have done walking trails with points of interest along the way. All sorts of different things. And then we have $25,000 in a broadband feasibility study that we are bringing to the Quad Cities. And so we have to raise $25,000, and Blandon will bring the other $25,000 to that pot for us to study the entire area and figure out what infrastructure is in our areas right now. We know some of it, but it's not all well mapped. And then we will, by the end of that feasibility study report, we will have a good map, and we will have good take rates, and we will have a good understanding of what our community really wants as far as infrastructure goes and what access they do have. So we use the intelligent community approach to sort of get all of this information together. That's on this slide here, talking about what broadband do we have, what's our knowledge workforce, what innovation are we planning, what's the digital equity divide that we have going on here in our communities, what's the sustainability of the projects that we're planning, because we don't want to plan something and put new equipment in somewhere and then have that die because the people are not there to continually use it and keep it updated. And what's the advocacy around broadband and its usage? So that's the community approach that we're using, which is why we did all of the facilitation of the community meetings. The next slide is project examples. I've talked about some of them, so you can kind of just read through those. The slide after that is the Iron Range Broadband Communities process. And it's an 18 to 24 month process. And we're down at about 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. We're down at about the 6th, if you go around clockwise, at about the 6th square there at project and grant development. So right now at the chamber, we're entertaining project proposals. to fill with grant dollars. And so at this point, we're kind of coming out to all of the community groups that we think could benefit from doing some access grants or some technology updates or software updates in their schools, in their communities. We've gone to townships, we've gone to town halls, we've gone to AEOA, a bunch of different groups, and we're talking to them about, here are some grant dollars available. If you have some projects, send them up to Melissa, and we'll work them through our process.
So so right now in Evelyn, Gilbert, we do have proposal for buses. We also have 3 hot spots in Evelyn itself. And then there's some community-based projects that the committee is evaluating that might be auditorium upgrades, that kind of thing. So there's a lot of projects right here in Evelyn. We have some in Gilbert, some in Virginia, and Mount Iron, she said, has had its cohort, so they've had access to funding. So, and then we have some other regional-wide projects that are being submitted. So everybody has an opportunity to submit those. Sorry.
Yep, no.
Excuse me.
So, you know, the next slide is how much broadband is good enough, and that really talks about how local leadership decides. You know, this is where our communities get to say what we think is appropriate for us. But it leads right into the next slide where you can see the border-to-border development grant program, and this is the map of Minnesota talking about the served, underserved, and unserved areas. You can see if you zoom in, I believe the next slide zooms into St. Louis County. That's our Arrowhead region. St. Louis County is pretty red, pretty unserved. So you can see some green spots in there. If you look at the next slide, that's really the Laurentian broadband area that we're keying in on. You can see that Evelyn and some of our surrounding areas have some decent coverage because of the work that the providers, the incumbent providers have done. So we're not completely unserved here, but there are some areas that could use better access. The next slide then talks about the infrastructure development process. On that circle, we are at the community partnership forums. Because what we're really talking about is which communities want to opt into this. You know, we've presented to Fayette Township, Worry Township, the City of Virginia is coming up. We've presented to the Virginia Public Schools. We presented to the City of Gilbert. We're going there again. You know, so we're working out there talking to our municipalities, our townships, and our school districts saying, you know, especially as a school district, you have a one-to-one initiative here, right? So you send all of your students home with devices. So if they can't access their work at home, that device goes home and it's kind of like a glorified book, right? Not a problem. But if they want to do flipped classrooms and other things like that with your curriculum here at the school, that becomes a little bit more difficult for those kids who can't access it when they leave here. So that's why school districts have been opting in and saying, we want to be a part of helping to fund the feasibility study and also to get, on the other side, some project funding towards our technology needs. And school districts have been great partners in those aspects. So, like I said, that takes a little bit longer because what we need to do is find providers who want to work with us. But 2.5 years into the feasibility study on the other side of the Iron Range, I worked with the Hibbing School District, Chisholm School District, Cherry Township, and Mount Iron Buell School District, and we did a joint feasibility study. We're doing that again with Tower and the East Range Joint Powers area this time. Last time we did this project, it was a 2-year project working through all of this with our consultant, etc. And now Cherry Township, very rural, has almost virtually no access unless you can reach it with your cell phone. And we have a project into the USDA, a grant request for a Rural Reconnect grant, which is 75% grant funding, 25% local match and provider funded. That is exactly what we want to start having happen in all of our rural areas, is to get to projects like that. So doing this work, raising our hand, the only reason that grant came down is because the gentleman at the USDA called up Whitney at the IRRR and said, hey, I hear you guys have been working on some broadband stuff. Do you know of any communities that might be ready to take, a part in our new grant opportunity coming up? Here's what it looks like. We all jumped on the phone and started talking about which communities in our service area that we've been working on this feasibility study with, who's ready for that opportunity. Turns out Cherry Township is. And their community, 50 residents filled their township hall saying, yep, that works for us, we want to be a part of that. So we only got tapped for that grant opportunity because we were ready to go. And they had maybe 60 days to write that entire grant request, get the letters of support, get all of the information together, and because we had a feasibility study ready to go, we could apply for that grant. But without that work done in advance, we wouldn't have been applying for that grant. So that's kind of our presentation at this point, talking to the school districts, trying to get you guys both aware of what's happening, make sure that you're thinking of this as you're putting together your curriculum plans and your project plans throughout the next year, and to, you know, raise your hand and be included and come after some of this grant funding. The Wi-Fi on the school buses will be a great project. There's others out there, I bet, if you talk to your staff. So that's what we're here talking about today. Yeah.
Thank you.
Any questions?
Do you know what the utilization generally is on Wi-Fi on school buses? What are any studies?
Yeah, so I mean, I can only speak from anecdotal experience that the bus that my kids were on was traversing to Cook County, and as soon as cell phone coverage cuts out, all of a sudden all the students lost their Wi-Fi on the bus because they were all, you know, working on homework on the trip, and everybody, hey, what happened to the Wi-Fi? And so we're getting calls from the coaches on the bus, our Wi-Fi cut out, you know. Yeah, that's because cell service dropped there, you know. But if you talk to the school bus drivers, they love it because they have quieter buses and students are actually able to work and get their homework done. And we've heard that from teachers, and we've heard that from students and parents as well. So I don't know that they've done any gathering of data, but from, you know, personal experience, I can say my kids love it.
Is there a safety factor too, to have that on buses? We don't still use these radios, do we, on our buses? Yeah, I thought
Yep.
we did, but if
Yep.
it works, it works, but.
Yeah, and
Would that
I
be
know that school districts deploy some pretty bulletproof, you know, firewalls and things like that. So what the students are able to use on school buses is the same thing that they can use in the classroom. So they're not necessarily using their phones on the buses and maybe getting access to things you don't want them to. They're using the same systems as you have, you know, on the school grounds. So you treat that bus like your school ground.
I thought our devices aren't, they are Wi-Fi, but they're not 4G, okay.
One of the conversations I had with Melissa was the fact that all of our rural routes and most extracurriculars are contracted buses, so I'm not sure how that would work. I don't know that we want to.
They do have some mobile things that you can bring onto the bus with you that doesn't have to be hardwired in, because it's literally just a device that they, you know, mount onto the bus right now, and it's serviced by whoever your cell provider is, AT&T, Verizon, things like that. But that would require, I think, some communication then between athletic or activities director, your coaches, you know, things like that. But yeah, if you're running it on buses, then that school bus drivers have to pick up a device on the way out the door. Maybe that isn't as, you know.
Yeah, most of our routes that we own are fairly short, I think like under 30 minutes. At worst, but all of our, like I said, we contract on our rural routes, the longer ones, we contract on most of our extracurriculars. And that may change in the coming years, so that's one of the conversations I had with Melissa is, do we want to put money into something that we don't own, A, and B, might not even be using 2 years from now. So.
Right. Yep, and that's where I would encourage you to stick to more of the mobile devices and to keep them captive to the school district, so it's something you own and can bring with you to whatever your, you know, bus provider. Yep. Yeah, so be cognizant of your changing situation over the next couple of years and make sure that what you're planning for isn't, you know, so hardwired in that you can't take it with you.
Yeah.
Yep.
I have one more question.
Sure.
You go. And that camera went just like that. Would this help Channel 12 at all, this kind of extra access?
Would it help us?
Yeah, Channel 12 with any other activities and stuff that you...
Definitely
Okay.
speed itself,
Okay.
yeah.
I do know that the Northwoods right now, there's a Cook-Or project that's going on, and they're looking at live streaming all of their sporting activities and their arts activities, working with students and with their public access, and making sure that they have the capacity and the storage capability for it. so that grandparents and those sorts of people who can't necessarily attend the event can see it later.
That's maybe where we could concentrate for sure, do too. Okay.
So,
Put it on the agenda.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
thank you.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Moving on, 12.2, approved property and liability insurance renewal. for
Mr.
the-
Chair, I invited our insurance agent, Jamie Linseth, to discuss with the board the renewal.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Welcome.
How are we doing? Everybody likes talking about insurance, right? All right, no, all kidding aside. You folks got a copy of the renewal, I believe, in your board packets,
Yep.
right? Not a whole lot changing there, coverage-wise. The only change really is on a work comp side that I would point out from this year to last. Our experience mod, which, I bore you with experience mod. You remember what experience mod is? The calculation from the state. I see a couple heads nodding. Yep, on your premiums compared to claims. It's a multiplier that the state comes through. Last year we were at a 0.88, which in theory, in layman's terms, means you're at 12% credit on your workers' comp rates. This year you're at a 1.02, so about 14% higher, but in all practicality, you're average. So that's really the biggest change, the only real change I can say.
The other thing that I asked him to do this year was look at our cyber liability. We had been covering, about 50,000?
We had 50,000.
Bump it, give us an estimate of what it'd go to $1 million. And the reason I say $1 million, I know that, just an example, Cloquet got hacked maybe a year or two ago. And by the time they got everything recovered, because you have to hire somebody to come in and recover all your junk, it cost them over $1 million to get their systems back up and all their data back. So, it's up for the board to think about. Because, if we do get hacked, there isn't anyone that's going to come in and volunteer to do that for us.
You're looking at about $2,300 a year, and is what the difference is to go from the 50,000. Cyber is the most concerning claim. We always used to be fire. What if the building burns down? Then it was, of course, liability. What if somebody gets injured? Which still are obviously concerns, but cyber has been the one. So we did include that option in there. Something for you guys obviously to consider and think about. And any questions as you look through there that you might have?
What is the junior high and the manual arts building setting us back dollar-wise? Is it as far as the liability of insuring those buildings?
Yeah, that's under a blanket, so I don't have a
Okay.
breakdown.
All right.
I can certainly get that to you.
No, I
Ballpark on. If you see at the very top what the property premium is there, it's included in there. So they're just giving us one lump sum.
okay.
The nice thing with blanket coverage is the individual coverage is listed out specifically, but if you needed to move that around a little bit,
Okay.
you could. So if the Franklin costs a touch more, the blanket's a good idea, but it doesn't give me the specific
Okay.
premium. But I can certainly get that to Jeff for you.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
One of my questions to Jamie today on the phone was, and I'll bring it up here too, because we had a discussion around the table at a different time, is coverage of traveling teachers using their own vehicles. And why don't you tell them what you told me today?
Yeah, we have coverage for what they call hired and non-owned auto in there. Very typical on a commercial policy. So you're a teacher, you are going from Evelyn campus to Gilbert campus in your own vehicle and you're in a car accident. Your physical damage is on your own policy. That's the liability is covered through the school. So you do have coverage through the school when you are traveling. But again, on a physical damage side to your own vehicle, if you're at fault in that accident, you're going to have coverage under your own policy.
You said liability, the school covers, is that what you said?
Correct.
Because it's work-related.
For the
right?
other property or
It's a non-owned auto that
Right.
you're using on school business.
Right.
A lot of times on a commercial side, it's maybe the person ready to make a deposit, the person ready to the post office, company time. Businesses will typically provide that coverage so those employees aren't on the hook.
So now to put your other hat on, selling residential or private insurance to an individual, what would you, in that situation, a person using their private car, on what kind of insurance would there be an umbrella for them, or what would you do for them, or tell them that they could or couldn't do, or should or shouldn't do, as far as their...
I mean, there's no exclusions, typically. I guess I can't speak for every insurance policy out there, but I could use my own insurance policy and there wouldn't be an exclusion for that. I mean, I personally carry higher limits, just the things I see day to day. I carry a personal umbrella, but not everybody does. So I mean, that's certainly their own comfort zone, but I guess maybe I'm not understanding the question.
Yeah, I think you are, but maybe go a little bit further. So if I were doing that and used my own car and had an accident and my insurance coverage, well, would they say, well, you're using that for your job, on the job, would there be a problem on just my personal insurance? And could I take up something, an umbrella or something to take care of that? Or should I?
I mean, it's each person's preference for sure. I think if they understand how that works, that their insurance is, in theory, responsible, the school's primary for liability. If they understand, I don't know if we have a policy or, a way that people would know that as an employee. But
This is similar for our county where
Yeah.
we have people traveling
Right.
every day for miles and miles. And we have the similar kind of thing with county where we have our personal vehicles.
I know, but if something should happen, is there like a rider? I said that word umbrella, but would that be
Yeah.
like a rider to a personal
I mean, your
policy?
I'll use again my example. My primary coverage would cover me.
Okay.
So you wouldn't need a,
Whether it's a job
You
you
or
wouldn't need a
not.
specific.
Yeah, the only
Okay.
thing that we
Rider.
spoke to is like if that teacher was going to have a student with them, which I would assume that we would not be endorsing, that's where. So like if we are transporting clients, that's where it would be
In your
an issue.
vehicle.
Exactly. That's,
You're correct. Yeah.
Tony stands by that too. But yeah, if we're just independently in the car, same with the staff members. But yeah, if they were transporting students, that would be a whole different discussion,
I
correct?
mean, in a perfect world, as we discussed, it'd be great if there was a Suburban or something sitting here that they could, get to work, and if they're driving around on company business, but it doesn't always work here, it doesn't work for the county. I'm here on my hired and not owned tonight, so. Which is great too, because when am I off the clock? When I leave here, when I get halfway home. But again, you've got both coverages. One of those is going to respond. So.
But again, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I was going to make a final point. Go ahead.
But again, it's a no-no for supervisors or teachers to transport students in their own cars. Very important to know.
Again, there's coverage here. I just think it's a very good practice to
Right.
avoid that. And it's always been referenced to me with another one of my hats through the district here that you just don't do that. So,
Our renewal this year is $155,000. What was it a couple of years ago?
you want to know when I started here? I can give you that. 2012, which was the first year I was here, was $209,542.
In what year?
2012-13. Actually, I take that back. There's a star there. That's the year
Not very
before.
often your insurance agent doesn't get as much as you did 6 years ago.
Well, and it's varied. I mean, it climbed back up in 2015 to about 191. We moved carriers. We moved to EMC at that time. You probably remember that.
Yep.
And it went down to 152,669 in 2016. So we're 4 years later, and we're about $2,800 more. So.
Then Jamie, were you able to take a look at that range mental health thing and
Yeah.
just kind of review as our insurance?
That
person?
Exhibit B, what you were asking
Yes,
about, which is nice. What they're telling you is what they have for coverage.
And is that adequate for
And
our purposes?
I think those are good limits. You want them at least what you have, if not more. The other thing, as I was reading through there, if you look at page 2, number 6, under indemnification, they're also holding you harmless. Thank you. That's wonderful. So they are holding you harmless. They will indemnify and defend you. So that's a great clause to have in there. That can be a challenge at times with contracts. So, we're carrying the public liability limits. They are at 2 million occurrence. They're carrying 3 million aggregate. I think those are.
Those are adequate?
I think those are.
Okay, good.
Thank you.
And that's the same with B and,
Correct.
okay.
Yep.
All right, good, thank you for looking at that extra.
No, thanks for having me. Anything else?
No?
Thanks, Jamie.
Yep, thank you.
Thanks, Jim.
So we're going to approve the renewal, correct, Jeff?
Can,
Oh, go ahead, Kelly.
I was just gonna make a motion. I was jumping the gun.
Okay, so at 12.2, we need a motion to approve the property and liability insurance renewal for the fiscal year 2019-2020.
I was gonna make a motion for option 2. The cybersecurity is very real, and you hear a lot about it, and given Jeff's recent example of a fairly close school district, I think it would be worth it in the long run.
That is how it is presented with that on it, right? Renewal?
It's an option on the renewal, yeah. If it's $2,300 more for the $1 million of cyber?
Drop in a bucket.
Yep.
I support.
Okay, we got a motion by Sather, support by Lotiger. Any more discussion? All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. 12.3, approve fiscal year 2019-2020 preliminary budget.
Mr. Chair, we we had a study session prior to this meeting and went through some final questions, and it is what it is, I guess, at this point.
It is what it is, I agree. Okay, so can I get a motion on 12.3 to approve the fiscal year 2019-2020 preliminary budget?
I will make the motion.
Motion by Lauder, can I get a second?
I'll support.
Support by Director Yuhan. All in favor?
We have
Discussion? Any
Were there-
discussion?
Were there any changes to the, I apologize for missing the work session earlier. Were there any changes to what we were given in our,
No, we talked a little bit about the rural bus route and should we or shouldn't we have it. I guess there was some, I don't know that they have a clear direction, but I think should there be official board action to terminate that contract?
okay, but this is standing still as now?
Well, and then there were some changes based on, there's some changes, I think it was like $184,200 difference because of changes like that bus route and stuff.
Bus route and changes in staffing rather than cutting off 4.3 FTE.
So the deficit was a little less.
Any more discussion? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. 12.4, approve the 10-year long-term facilities maintenance plan.
Just another thing we went through prior to the meeting today. It just reflects less spending due to the fact that we won't be here 10 years from now. Hopefully. Hopefully we got something built by then.
So, 12.4, can I get a motion to approve the 10-year long-term facilities maintenance plan?
So moved.
Moved by Director Schoberg,
Support.
support by Director Sather. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. 12.5, approve the joint powers agreement with Affinity Online.
Mr. Chair, Principal Williams introduced this concept at our last regular meeting, and she is back today to answer any questions that you may have. The proposal would be to move from MSC Online. We have a limited number of students when they can't get a class to fit into their schedule, or if it's something that we don't offer. It's not a lot of students, but Principal Williams is recommending that we move service providers from MSC Online to Infinity Online, and she's here if you have any questions regarding that. That's all I got.
I know at the last board meeting, Polly had a question on page 14 regarding the duration. So I did call the director of Infinity, Joe McClure, and she said on that page when it's talking about the duration, it's talking about Infinity, the overarching program, that they would need a majority vote of the executive council to disband Infinity. If we wanted to get out of the contract, she says, you just call us and you let us know that it's not working for you, you want to switch to another provider, and we'll, prorate everything and only charge you for how many months you've used. And I said, well, in the contract, it does say you need 120 days in advance, and she said she has never held any district to that. That, yes, it does say, they would like to have 120 days notice, but she says we've had people not make that deadline, and it's never been a problem. So so that's what that duration was for. And then I know the other question too came up, because it's a little confusing on page 2 when it talks about that on the board there should be no more than 6 to 15 members, and there's a school board member that's appointed, and there's 27 schools, so how could you have a school board member from all 27 schools? That's more than 15 members. She explained how the executive council is made up of superintendents, and it's by their Massa region. So like Massa Region 7 we belong to, and our representative, the two superintendents, are Floodwood and Hill City. So Floodwood and Hill City select a school board member then to be on there. So it's more by the region. So there's a school board member from Hill City and Floodwood that would be representing our region for us. And that's how they stay within 16 or 6 to 15 members.
Then is there a rotation of those region school boards?
I believe so.
I mean, school district?
Yes. Yep.
That makes a lot more sense.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. 12.5, can I get a motion to approve the joint powers agreement with Infinity Online?
I'll move. Support.
Moved by Director Sather, support by Lotiger. Any discussion? All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. 12.6, approve resolution 696 ratifying the sale of the bonds.
Mr. Chair, I have Greg Crow from Ellers present to give the board good news of the bond sales today.
Yeah, it's great to be here tonight. Thanks for having me, and I do have good news. I'll just get right to the punchline, and then we can walk through the sale day report, which should hopefully answer any questions you have about the bond issue, and then you have a resolution with a lot of boilerplate language and a lot of the info that's in the sale day report. So I can answer questions about either of those. But we have been working pretty diligently over the last week or so to respond to investor requests for information, clarify the issuance of the bonds, the participation of the state and the IRRR, and I think we were rewarded this morning. We sold the bonds at 10:30. We took competitive bids at the same time for both the Evelyn Gilbert bonds and the Virginia bonds, and both bond issues had 6 bids, and both bond issues have received a low bid interest rate of 2.74%. The interest rate market right now for municipal bonds is, it's a great time to be selling bonds right now. If you remember during the election, we had a 4.1% interest rate. When we talked about the pre-sale at the joint meeting, we talked about 3% in the 3.06 for Evelyn Gilbert and 3.53 for Virginia, and it's even lower than that. So a great result. This will benefit your taxpayers, obviously. It benefits the state of Minnesota a little bit because they don't have to pay as much debt equalization aid because your debt payments aren't as high. So there's a little less participation that they're obligated for. But really a great result. And we're really pleased, and I'll talk about some of the details behind it as we go through the report. But your bonds were favorably received, and I got some great bids for you. So if you look at the report, the front cover has a strange number on it, and you may notice that it's not $30,940,000 of bond issue, which is what the voters approved. What that is we talked about it at that meeting where I went through the pre-sale report with the premium bid concept. And we did get a premium bid, which means that the low bid underwriter paid you more for the bonds than you were selling them for. However, you're only allowed to basically collect enough to meet what the voters authorized, even though that means issuing less bonds. So what happens is we lower the bond size amount, We take some of that premium and we apply that to project costs and other costs of issuance and anything else, and you end up issuing less debt and ending up with the same amount, and actually a little bit more we'll get into, in your construction fund to finance your projects. So that's actually a nice part of the bid result. So let's look at the first page, inside front cover. You obviously know the purpose of the bonds. I want to mention the rating. You currently at the moment don't have an underlying rating, so you received the S&P AAA rating for the State Credit Enhancement Program, which is the state's rating. So when we sold the bonds, it was carrying that AAA rating. And then we had a rating call about a week and a half ago with both districts, and then a separate rating call with IRRR to talk about the mining economy, local economy, the support of the project, and all of that came together really, even with the additional debt the school district is taking on. The rating agency was impressed with the financial management by the school board, administration of the district, and the support from the state for the debt service, and assigned a A+ rating for the bond issue. Most districts outside of the metro area are in the A range, AA and AAA in the metro area, but outside 7 County, they're mostly A range, which is A-A or A+. So you actually, even with issuing this amount of debt, ended up on the high end of what's a typical rating for outstate Minnesota. So that's a great result. It's a testament to you, your management of the district. There's also factors that are out of your control, like your tax base and your economy and things like that. But going into the market with that A+ underlying rating is a positive thing too, in terms of issuing the bonds. As I mentioned, you got 6 bids. The lowest bidder was a company, you probably have heard the name of, Piper Jaffray, out of Minneapolis. So they're a pretty common underwriter that bids on bonds that are sold in Minnesota. So that's kind of nice to see. And we'll go through the bids in detail on one of the attachments. So their low bid was 2.73%, and the high bid was 2.8%. Now, that's obviously a really small spread, less than 0.1%. So we're seeing that in most of the bids as we're issuing competitive bonds over the last couple of weeks. There's a lot of demand for the bonds. That's driving down interest rates, and it's compressing the range of bids. But even with that, the difference in interest is over $600,000. So doing that competitive sale, taking bids, just like when you do a roof, helps drive the general price down and gets you what is arguably the best interest rate that you can get on any given day. There's a table of statistics that we'll just kind of gloss over and cover as we go through the detailed financial information. The italicized note is the what we talked about with the premium and reducing the bond size down to the $28.55 million. And then I'll note the notes section highlights the impact of that interest rate change on the taxes and total payments. So we had 4.1% in the pre-election estimates, 3.06 in the pre-sale report. So the 2.74 is substantially lower, and we've got a chart of interest rates showing you how they've declined over time. What it means is that total principal and interest on the $30 million is going to be just almost $6 million less over the life of the bonds for your taxpayers to pay. So that's great news. And on a residential homestead property example, we pulled in the $125,000 home. We had talked during the election about a $252 a year tax impact. With this result, it'll be $195. So significantly lower than we've been talked about as a result of the great interest rate. So that's great news for your taxpayers as well. And that plays through all of those types and kinds of properties in that same kind of proportion. And we've got some more examples in the sheet. So on the top of the next page, school board action. So if you remember in May, you actually adopted a parameters resolution that said the superintendent or business manager and a board officer could accept the lowest bid if it was under 4.5%. This is obviously under 4.5%. So prior to the meeting, the superintendent and board chair signed the proposal agreement accepting that low bid. So the bid has been awarded, and the resolution you're adopting is ratifying the award of the bid, or of the proposal to the low bidder.
Excuse me, Greg, can I back up for 1 second? Where, so the impact on a $125,000 house is $195 annually as opposed to $252 that we were estimating it at?
Correct.
So basically, is it safe to say that across the board, it's basically 80% of what we told people it would be?
Yes, that's exactly right.
Okay, thank you.
Yep, and you'll see that one of the attachments is that longer tax impact schedule with all the different types, and you'll see that percentage reduction basically straight down the line. The only exception I'll mention is the ag land, which, as we talked about, you don't have a lot of farmland, but you do have some managed forest and timberland, and the state adopted an increase in the ag land tax credit for school building bonds. It was 40%, now it's 50%, and it's going to go up to 70%. So for ag land, if you do the percentage, the drop is greater because that credit from the state is bigger now than what we expected during the election.
Thank you.
Okay, so let's look at the bids specifically, starting on the attachments, page 1. As I mentioned, Piper Jaffray was the low bidder, and you see the true interest rate of 2.73, and with the downsizing of the bond, that adjusted to round it up to 2.74. So they bid it at 2.73. It ended up at 2.74. The other bids came in from some regional bidders, Baird out of Milwaukee, Wisconsin, but national bidders, including some of the big East Coast banks, Wells Fargo out of their Charlotte office, Morgan Stanley from New York, JP Morgan from New York, and Bank of America Merrill Lynch from New York. And interestingly, Bank of America was the low bidder for your bonds, but they were actually the best bidder, or the high bidder, so they were the best bidder for the Virginia School District bonds. So they bid 2.8 on your bonds and 2.73 for Virginia. So, but we have seen them over the last probably 18 months. Bank of America Merrill Lynch has has been the lowest bidder on all of the bonds that we have placed in a competitive bid process that are over $100 million. So they're very interested in those really big bond issues, and so pretty clear they sharpened their pencil to try and get that one. So, and I'm throwing, if you don't want to hear about what happened in Virginia, that's fine, but I figured you're kind of curious probably what happened, so I'll sprinkle some of that in. So let's look at attachments page 3, and this is the sheet that kind of shows us how we get from the lower bond amount to having enough money for the project. So if you look on the upper right, results of bond sale, you see that the authorized amount of the bonds is the same, $30.9 million, but the bond issue is reduced to $28.5 million, so almost $2.5 million lower. Project cost is the same, but if you go down to sources of funds, the estimated premium, we had 0 for the pre-election estimates because it's really a function of the market at the time that the bids for the bonds are taken. And what Piper Jaffray offered was a $2.5 million premium. And obviously, as I mentioned, you can use that for project costs and some costs of issuance. So that's what we did. The investments earnings are slightly different because there's slightly more going into the construction fund. I will say that is still the conservative estimate from during the election, and we're working on with Cross Anderson to update that based on the draw schedule, because we'll set those investments for that construction fund based on when you need liquidity to draw for construction costs. So we expect that'll be higher, and we'll refine that over the next couple of weeks now that the bonds are sold. So that's kind of like anything extra in there. It's almost like an owner's contingency. Maybe you don't even want to tell KA. No. But basically, that's going to be money that you have that you can use on the project. Any monies earned in the construction fund on interest are eligible for spending on the project costs. So then on uses of funds, the allowance for discount bidding is kind of like points on a mortgage. It's what the bank or the underwriter takes as their compensation. And you can see that they took about half of what we projected during the pre-election estimate. So that contributed to making a little bit more funds available for the project. Capitalized interest is the money that's spent out of the project fund to pay the first year's interest cost, and actually that's a little lower because of the lower interest rate, but we're also planning to finance that out of the premium. So that frees up some money for projects as well. Finally, costs of issuance, the legal and fiscal costs are slightly lower at about $5,000 than what we had estimated during the election. So you can see that with the authorized bond amount, or the maximum bond issuance amount that's allowed based on what your voters authorized, we're projecting now that you'll have about $30.9 million for project costs, which is about $325,000 more than we had projected during the election. So that's additional sort of contingency funds that you can use on the project over and above what's built into the budget, plus whatever might be added through better investment returns. So that's good news as well. More money for the project, lower bond issuance amount, and lower tax impact. So it's kind of a win-win-win. So let's look quickly at page 4 of the attachments. This really is just the principal and interest schedule, amortization schedule, kind of laid up against your existing debt. We worked through that, calculate the state aid projections, and then the contribution from the IRRB, which we adjusted slightly. It was about $900,000 in the pre-election estimates. Now it's about $1 million, just basically to keep the tax impact exactly the same between Evelyn, Gilbert, and Virginia. And the tax rate of 24.67 on the far right for the first year of the bonds, that was 30.47 during the election, so a significant reduction in the tax rate compared to what we had projected. The bond schedule, the chart looks about the same on the next page. It's just all the bars are a little lower because of the lower interest rate. And then finally on page 6, the tax impact, and this is where I mentioned the, if you look at the $125,000 home, it goes down from $252 to $195. If you pick something that's kind of close to double that, so say the $200,000 home goes down from $461 to $356, so kind of roughly that same proportion. So on a monthly basis, we talked a lot about the $21 a month for those homes during the election. It's about $16 a month now. So really almost a 20, roughly 25% reduction in the tax impact. So, and the reason for that, we thought we'd throw in an interest rate chart on the last attachment. When we were up here in January and February in this section of the graph, when we were setting all the schedules for the review and comment in the election. And when we were here, we typically, when we go into an election, we say, you know what, we need to build a little cushion in case rates go up. And so, we were thinking maybe things would go up. Well, then the bottom dropped out of rates, which is great news for you. And so now we're at this big difference between kind of where we projected we might be to where we actually are. So, so that's why. And, there's a lot of things that happen in the economy. I wish we could have predicted this at the time of the election, but I usually say if I could predict this, I'd be living on my own private island. So,
Crystal ball at home, huh?
So we're just glad to bring the good news and share that with you. So the last attachment is the rating report. I'll let you read this at your leisure. If you have insomnia, this is great to help you get to sleep at night. I'll just point out at the bottom of page, the middle of page 6 of the rating report. They're just an upside and a downside scenario, and that's okay to look at. The other thing is on page 3, they talk about the rating reflects the district's good income and market value per capita, that's tax base, which is in your control, very strong available reserves, which is something the board can manage, and a history of stable financial performance, which is also a credit to you and your management of the school district. And then you're obviously, as I mentioned, at the high end of the rating scale for a non-metro district. So on the upside scenario, they say, well, unlikely they could raise the rating if the economy were to diversify and economic metrics were to improve. And then they mention in the downside scenario, particularly what's in your control is draws on reserves, so deficit spending. That could potentially trigger a downgrade in the rating. And then they mentioned weakening of the debt profile and additional substantial new money debt beyond what has already been issued. So there's some flags in there about that as well. So that's everything I have, and everything, most of these numbers are in the resolution. So I'm happy to answer any questions about the report or the information in the resolution before you vote on it.
Can we get an updated tax calculator for on our website? Or,
Well, we can post this thing. I don't, do you have a?
Yeah, I think we could go in and tweak the existing one and put the new tax rate in.
That would
Yeah,
be great.
I think that would be great.
Yeah.
Yep.
We'll have to put some disclaimers on the front that this is the results of the bond sale, so people understand why they might be getting a different result. But yeah, I think we should be able to do that.
Thank you.
Thanks.
It's a great idea. No one ever brought that up before.
What, to update it?
Yeah, after
Oh.
the fact, yeah.
Oh.
We do leave them up because we get calls, a month later saying, well, I didn't run it before, but now that it passed, I want to
Yeah.
see what happened. So
Yeah.
we do know people continue to go back to those sites, so.
So 12.6, approve resolution 696 ratifying the sale of the bonds. This will require a roll call vote. Kelly?
There was no other questions for him, so if you can
Oh.
sit down.
Oh,
No other questions?
Thanks, Greg.
Thank you.
thank you, Greg. I'm sorry.
I do just want to say thank you. We do appreciate very much the opportunity we've had to work with you. This is an incredible project, and it's been challenging from the get-go, but we appreciate the choice you made in choosing to work with us and letting us partner with you. So thank you very much.
And I
Thank you.
thank you for using terms that I understand.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay.
So, I don't think that people want to listen to me do like 7 pages.
No.
Okay, thank you. So I will just do resolution number 696 relating to $29,490,000 general obligation school building bonds, series 2019A, ratifying the award of sale, prescribing the form and details, and providing for the payment thereof.
Need a motion and a second.
I get a motion.
I will make the motion to ratify the bond resolution.
Second.
Motion by Lotiger, second by Director Schoberg. Can I get a roll call vote, please? Or any discussion? Excuse me. Any more discussion? Can I get a roll call vote, please?
Yes. Director Yuan.
Yes.
Director Schoberg.
Yes.
Director Lotiger.
Yes.
I am a yes. Director Addy.
Yes.
Director Sorkin.
Aye.
And Director Gentilini is absent. So the resolution number 696 passes with 6 yeses and 1 absentee.
Very good.
Awesome.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Greg.
Thank you. It's always nice to have things,
Turn out
yeah, for the better.
better for everyone.
Yeah.
Let's see if I get confused. 12.7, set closed session to discuss ASME and admin negotiation strategies.
I will make the motion to set closed session to discuss ASME and Minnesota negotiation strategies. Support.
There was a motion by Lotiger, support by Sather. Any discussion? No, we don't. Any discussion?
Discussion.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. 13.0, old business, there is none. Huh? Okay, 14.0, administrative report and information.
All right, I just want to, what's going on? Maybe answer questions if you have them, if I can. This past couple weeks, though, we had an all-staff kick-up on June 11th up in the auditorium here. We had, between the two school districts, we had about 140 people here. We had a good introduction. We allowed staff to go into groups so that they could meet their new coworkers. And they had a little discussion, and we came back and talked about where we're headed from here and things that they're concerned about, stuff like that. On the 12th, we had a community workshop, which was much the same staff kickoff, only we invited community in. We had a little over 100 people show up to that between morning and afternoon sessions. And then on the 18th, 19th, and 20th, we had specific hour-long programming meetings where, say, fire department was able to come in and voice their concerns about any fears, wishes, that kind of thing that they may have before we start looking too deep. Very well attended. We had, in the 3 days, we had over 260 staff show up in both districts, and probably about maybe 30 community members sprinkled in there. They picked various topics. As you can imagine, the hour-long athletics meeting was very popular.
I have a question, Jeff. Where does Head Start fit in with this whole plan? I don't remember hearing them, discussed or.
Well, they are an independent organization.
No, I know that, but.
They're not affiliated. Our only involvement with them is we rent them space right now.
I know, but I haven't heard in conversation any, any accommodation of them in the combination.
I don't know that we have, well, I can tell you, we haven't had that conversation.
Virginia has a Head Start program too?
Yes.
So I just, as far as space and everything, I just really realized they've been
I
kind
know,
of
well,
left out
I
of
should
the
say that
conversation.
I did have a conversation with Skip Ferris, and he asked if we would be interested in, because Skip put in an application to be on next year's bonding issue at the state to build new rooms, so they could potentially have some. When I say very potential, but they're on the next bonding issue as far as, I think he put in for like $2 million for 2 new rooms.
For their own facility? Or for?
Which would be attached to ours, yeah.
Oh, okay, so I didn't hear, okay. I just was wondering about any
That's as far as
cooperation.
that conversation has gone. He doesn't know if that's going to happen or anything else. A little bit about the Joint Powers Agreement. So we had talked about that at the 13th Joint Powers meeting. Mitch kind of went through that. We're going to be represented by Margaret Skelton. Virginia is represented by this Trevor Helmers, who is also a city's attorney. They are working on that this week and are hoping to have a draft to the board by Monday. So you can start looking over that. Dream up any questions that you may have for them. We'll probably be looking at that in the July meeting. A little bit on land acquisition. There are currently surveyors on site from Kimley Horn. They're trying to lay out. Well, they're mapping out wetlands right now, and they're trying to figure out where. They're working with the architects to figure out where the best layout might be for the various buildings. What you're looking at here is what we have been referring to as Site A. This is Slumberland down here, so you're heading up into Progress Park, and we've kind of been looking in this area maybe for an elementary somewhere in there. And I did have a conversation with the city of Evelyn about the possible sale of that, and they seem to be on board and okay, but they need to know more specifically what area we want. So Kimley Horn is up there looking at what would be the most ideal place to put a building. And one of the things that, this is just a hand-drawn map that Todd from Kimley Horn sent me back, but just a walkthrough, he's saying that this is the area that we're just looking at. There's a wet slough through here, and a couple other little pockets there. But he said the interesting thing about those wet pockets is that's all rock ledge up there. It's basically bathtub effect. I mean, when it rains, it's wet, so it might not necessarily be wetlands. It's just wet right now. So they're doing some more research on that. But
How many acres is that right there, that green spot?
this is a full 40 right here on this line. This is state land up here. That they're also, Carl Sanderson has put an inquiry in as a possible exchange for wetlands. I'll get to that in a second. This is another 40 over here. This is just a small piece up here. I think it's around 8 acres.
Wasn't the original site closer to where that power line is? It'd be to the south?
Yeah, the power line is,
To the right.
power line runs about right here.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
It's right in there. It's in that piece.
And that may where it will end up, I'll put back one. That might well end, you can see where the power line is there.
Yeah.
That might well end up where it is because this particular chunk right here is very dry. It's very buildable. It's not too rocky. So that might end up being the B spot. So anyway, they're working on that. They hope to, by July 2nd, they're telling me they will have a full report to us for where they feel is the best area for us to build our schools and what we'll need to do that there.
Excuse me, but what about the senior high site? What's the status on that?
I'm not directly working with that, Noel is, but I can tell you that I'll go back to that once I finish this slideshow because I'll pull up a different map so I can show you. So July meetings are set. Looking at another community design meeting here in the auditorium on July 17th with more programming meetings, diving in a little more specific on those areas. On the 23rd, 24th, 25th, we'll send out the schedules as to when
Keep
those
that
are.
up there, Jeff.
What's that?
Keep that up there for a second. Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Bless you.
Thank you, thank you.
Looking at taking some field trips with some of our staff. Last week of July, first week of August, Cunningham is currently reaching out to school districts that they have deemed progressive, just to give us some ideas as to some things that we may want to do or may not want to do, that kind of thing. They're looking at probably 4 sites for the high school and 3 for the elementary. I don't have the exact dates of where they're going or where those schools are at the moment, but they say that they will have that to me by July 2nd as well. Consolidation, Mitch, we talked about consolidation on the 13th. Mitch is working on a draft resolution for consolidation that the board will consider at their July meeting. Basically what it is, it starts the process. Doesn't formally consolidate us by any means, but at least starts the process and authorizes administration to proceed with whatever needs to happen according to state statute. A couple things just to consider moving forward, things that we should probably be meeting on, maybe with Virginia, maybe not with Virginia, but just some things to think about. That whole consolidation timeline and all the questions that go with it. There's a million of them. I put 199, but million didn't fit in that space there. Land acquisition, we need to meet about that, and I'll flip to another map and kind of explain why we need to talk about that a little more. There's the whole process of naming, athletics, administration structure, I mean all that junk that it's kind of hitting us at the moment. I put attendance boundaries on there. One of the things that was brought up at some point is, I mean, you start looking at attendance boundaries. I mean, I don't know how loud I should say this, but I mean, if you look at an overall map and where the kids are, I don't know that it makes sense to be shipping a whole bunch more across the bridge or not. I mean, and those are decisions that boards are gonna have to make as to which direction those kids are gonna go as one, if we are one district. So, one district.
Like
What do you mean across the
It's
district?
specifically midway, you know, our elementary's gonna be a stone's throw away. Why would you send the kids from elementary to Virginia when they could,
And
school's
the
in their
reason that
backyard?
the reason that I'm bringing that up now is, I mean, that has a direct effect on how big that building
Yep.
is.
Mhm.
Because it is a significant amount of students, like 2 sections worth.
2 sessions per grade.
You know. Yeah, so I mean, we're planning on 3-section building right now, and obviously if we added that to it, it's gonna significantly change. If that happens, I mean, but like I said, that's a conversation that has to happen. So I don't know, I'm working with Kraus Anderson for a timeline for when we can put people in a room to start discussing these things, because I mean, until they have some of those answers, they can't even put a pen to paper
Right.
at this point. So. I do want to mention our kindergarten, I already did at the study session, but we currently have 70 registered, which is about 30 more than we typically have at this time of year. So that's good news, real good news. We do have over 100 on the census, so it might happen.
What are we sitting at right now for, how many sections did we approve for kindergarten? What, we're at 3?
Yeah. I'd say as we approach 75, we'd have to consider the 4.
Okay.
I'm going to pull up another map here. That was the end of that. You're looking at Slumberland right here. This is Highway 53. This was an initial walkthrough by Kim and Horn. Basically, this whole swath here is going to be unbuildable. So you're looking at, they're a little, I have this outlined here. This is my handwriting. This is mostly not, wetlands is, well, I'm sure Matt knows. I mean, it all depends on what plants are growing in the ground. I mean, it's just because it's wet doesn't mean it's wetlands. So I mean, he initially put this on because it was wet, but he's thinking that that's not wetlands. So basically, you have everything from here down, which eliminates about half the site that we originally, the 96 acres that we thought we originally had. Where that's going to cause a problem, it's not going to cause, the school will still go where we thought the school would go. Maybe a football stadium, parking lot and stuff will be fine. We are going to struggle putting baseball fields and softball fields right there, which is where some other ideas come into play. There's that state piece that I had mentioned earlier, possibly doing a land exchange there. There's a 40 that's actually fairly flat for the area, and there is no wetlands in it. It's state-owned up there. This is RGGS here. This piece here would be part of the site we purchased, so it would be adjacent to that. This is just for a point of reference.
But Jeff, that road goes right in the middle of that piece. That Progress Park Road goes right through the middle.
Which one?
White Cedar
The green
Drive.
one. No, we're talking about, go back one, the rocky one.
It shows it right there.
I know, so how do you build, school sites?
The road right down the middle.
You're looking at 20 acres on each side of the road, which is
Yeah.
all we need for an elementary.
Yeah, I know, but the road going right through it, won't that become kind of a traffic, more higher traffic road than it is now?
That road's huge.
Yeah.
It goes right through the middle.
They don't seem to
It just occurred to me now that there's that land on both sides of that road. It's not just on
Does
the
the,
east side.
But
But
the
does the
site
road
would be on
end right
one
there?
side. on
Yes,
Yeah,
yes.
we would,
East side,
we wouldn't split.
correct.
Well, then that cuts the acreage in half.
But the road ends right there, so I'm assuming.
No, it
No, it
goes all the
doesn't.
way
It
around.
goes- It actually goes all the way.
It looks like
To
it.
Super
It
8.
hangs right, it cuts out
Okay.
the Super 8 there.
Okay, well,
That's a 40-acre parcel, correct, with the road splitting it, the 20 on
Yes.
each side?
Yep.
yeah,
Okay.
so I mean, that cuts that on one side, but
But we're just looking for 20 though. We're
20
not
for
looking
now,
40.
actually, is fine. Because you don't have all the fields then. Black
we
parking.
probably just use the east side of that road.
Could be.
Not both sides?
Yep.
Okay.
Wasn't there a chunk of land that Spectrum had too that could be available
That's for the other side, yeah.
for the other side?
If you look at
That green?
the green part, there's currently a pole building on that site, and then the Spectrum Health building is on the next one. They're each 9-acre plots.
That's not enough to do anything with.
It is for sale,
Which, the green?
The pole building one too?
both of them.
Are they both owned by Spectrum?
They're both owned by Spectrum.
Okay.
He wants
I think the plan would be to chunk off that little bit where it has the building and then the rest would be,
he's looking at selling the whole thing.
okay.
He wants a good chunk of money for it. So, it is an option though. So anyway, like I said, by July 2nd, we're supposed to have a specific layout of where things are going to lay and what they need to do, and we'll be able to have a better look at than what I'm giving you right now. This is very preliminary. That's all I have, Mr. Chair.
Ready? Thanks, Jeff. 15.0, board member topics. Director Schiller.
I'll pass.
Director Lotiger.
I don't know if I have anything, but I did go to the community input meeting for some of those program meetings, and some of the information, or some of the suggestions were pretty good that came from the community. So I hope that community keeps coming and keeps providing input and is part of this process. That's all I got.
Dr. Shaler.
I don't think I have anything.
And I wish I could have attended some of those meetings that you went to, but I just a little bit behind in my business, so
Next month it's not a month.
Got the dates.
Okay. Great.
And times.
Yeah.
We need time.
Director Sorkin.
Yeah, just something related to the combination. I see that Virginia has put out a couple of the extra positions that you had talked about at previous meetings, Jeff. And one would be like a coordinator between the school and the businesses for the internships and whatever, the student things with businesses. And then we talked about a liaison during the construction project. We got this at that joint meeting. And some employees about curriculum coordination and something about the construction phase. But it seems as though Virginia's already put out a job description for those two positions, and then adding a transportation secretary to maintenance. And I'm just wondering, was there some decision made which district was going to carry those jobs? And
No, they didn't put anything out. They had a study session last night where they discussed that, and I personally feel there was some misinformation there about those positions. I think Cross Anderson budgeted for one person to be a liaison between the school and I feel like my counterpart probably took that to mean 5. So I mean, he was corrected by Cross Anderson, so we're not hiring 5 people.
well, not even that it's 5, it's that they're setting the ball in motion. And again, I'm not,
They're not setting the ball in
Well,
motion. They had a discussion.
I
on
know,
the study session.
I know, they
I
did.
think
the job description.
I think
Yeah, job description.
this matter, maybe, Paul, you could discuss that with Jeff. I mean, the board member topics, I do get it. I do get it, but it's kind of more of a what's going on in the community type thing, more feel-good stuff, I guess. If
Well, you know-
you may want to discuss that with him.
Because it just was, like you said, they had a meeting yesterday and a working session and a board meeting, it's like, it popped up, it's very, very recent.
Right.
And I'm not sure, though, that I agree with you that board member topics should just be touchy-feely.
Well, it's
And
not,
I think, I think you can have substance to board member topics too, and there's nothing wrong with that, so.
As long as those conversations happen prior to the table. I mean, you could,
Well-
if there's things that you question, and this is just my opinion,
Yeah.
but if there's things that you have questions about, you can contact Jeff regarding those things and get some of those answers before having to spend time at the table.
So
Because
it's not-
maybe it's a question that, you can have answered just in one conversation with him. And if it's something that needs to be brought to the attention of the whole board, I think Jeff is competent to know that he needs to let the whole board know that.
But, so
My
it's not
opinion.
time well spent, and it's not good information for the rest of the board members to have?
It's fine.
I mean, it's not,
It's
it's a discussion we as a board should have, maybe it should be an agenda.
But it's like a surprise, too, I guess.
Well, it
bit
was
of
a surprise to, no, it was a surprise to me to see that, they've got a job description for one of these, they mentioned two others.
Well,
And
if it's
it's
any
like they're,
consolation, it was a surprise to me, too.
well, okay, that's a good, that's just a good answer.
information.
Yeah.
No,
It's
see, no, that's a good
information,
answer. It's a surprise, are they going, like I say, forward with things that maybe we should be talking about together?
And I completely agree, Polly. I don't disagree with you bringing it up. I think, I agree completely. And I think, yeah, it was information for Jeff to say, yeah, I didn't know about the planner of all of that going forward
4
either.
hours before they had the meeting, and I expressed my displeasure.
Yeah, I
with having
mean-
that meeting,
But at that point, I think then we have
I
to
don't have any
just,
say in it, so they did it anyway.
well, exactly. And I think at that point, though, we take that information and knowledge, and I'm assuming Jeff will have further conversations with Noel, and we can have further conversations at our
Okay.
collaborative meetings about it.
And that's
But
a
I
good
agree.
point. So as a board member topic, maybe just the result of it should be is that this brings up the situation of maybe both districts and both boards and both superintendents should be talking about these things together and coordinating.
That
Okay?
part I
And
agree.
that's-
That part I
And
agree with.
that was what I mentioned in the admin report. I mean, those are, we gotta start talking about those.
Yeah.
things.
Yeah.
That part I do agree with.
Thank you. That's all
I
I
do
meant
believe
by
that.
I don't feel
there are
that they,
things
I don't
that-
feel that they should have had that conversation any more than we should have that conversation. I mean,
Yep.
you
There
all
are
you
some
need to be in the
things-
room together and make that decision.
Gotcha.
I agree, there are some things that we should be discussing as
deciding
a
together.
whole group and deciding together.
Like at a joint meeting or even before, okay.
Yeah.
So you get where I
When-
came from, right? I hope you understand that, because it was kind of, like I said, it was, yeah, I mean, we never heard it, but we never heard about it, but you did, whatever. I just
Well, that's all I
caught
have.
off guard. I was caught off guard. I don't know what you guys.
That's all I
One
have.
quick piece to it, though, is just to reinforce what the list of items that Jeff had on the administrative report, that it is so important that we get on top of meeting and discussing, because all of those are interconnected. And, I mean, in order for us to really do a good job with this, we really have to stay on top and begin meeting.
And the train is going really fast.
Yeah.
There's
It
so many-
is. It will go
And I
fast.
think what has been blowing a lot of people's minds is, I mean, we're not the first school district that's talked about consolidation. We are the first school district in the state of Minnesota that's talked about consolidation while you're building a building. I mean, we are. I mean, the unusual part is usually by this time in a consolidation process, well, by this time the consolidation process is further down the road. I mean, you're down to one administration, you have one board maybe, so you're not having two different people say two different things to two different boards that should both be involved. I mean, and it's got it's just the nature of the beast that we're dealing with right now, and we need to address that and decide the best way forward so that we aren't frustrated by those issues anymore. And we need to create that timeline of, this is what's going to happen with this is what's going to look like with the joint powers agreement. What does it look like moving forward? How long are we going to be two separate districts? How long does it take?
When is us versus them going to be?
I mean, when
we?
does that go?
When are
away?
we going
I
to
mean,
be
when do we
together?
start talking like we're going to be one district? And that's, like I said, I mean, the guys from Cunningham are clamoring for us to tell them how big the elementary. I don't have an answer for them right now because it could be 5 sections, it could be 3.
And that's a big,
Those are
Yeah.
big discussions that we have to have.
and I would
Well said.
assume that Virginia is feeling the same way.
But
I mean,
absolutely they are. I mean-
They want to work with us just as much as we want to work with them, and this whole process has been great with working with them, so I'm sure they're having some of the same feelings that we're having. So,
It is, and there's, like I said, they're just as frustrated as we are, and we need to sit down and figure out how we're not going to be
The
frustrated
details.
anymore.
Start finding details. Okay.
Okay. That's it? All
We're gonna
right.
do a closed session
Okay,
here, and
we're gonna-
then we'll adjourn.
How's that go again, Jeff? It's
Break.
a long
We're gonna
day.
take a little break here.
Okay.
You're gonna kick everybody off.
Yeah, we'll take a break. It will we'll return for closed sessions to discuss negotiation strategies.
at which time then you will ask the public to leave.
Right.